All right, today we are cutting through all the noise surrounding the self-driving car race. The headlines are just jam-packed with hype, but a deep dive analysis suggests the reality on the ground, well, it's a completely different story. So let's get into it.
You hear about it constantly, right? The race to build a fully autonomous robotaxi. It is one of the biggest, most expensive stories in tech. But with all the big promises and those really slick demos, are the companies we think are leading the pack, are they really as far ahead as they want us to believe? It's time to take a much closer look. So first up on the list, BYD, the Chinese auto giant that has literally everyone talking. For a while now, they've been hyped up as the ultimate Tesla killer, and a big part of that hype is their ambitious self-driving system, which they call God's Eye.
And you can totally see why. I mean, the narrative was incredibly powerful. At one point, they even briefly outsold Tesla in EV sales, which, let me tell you, sent some serious shockwaves through the industry. The perception was that these guys were just an unstoppable force, not just in making cars, but in the tech too.
The promise of God's Eye was huge. A super sophisticated system for everybody, backed by just mountains of data. But the reality? It seems to be a very different picture. We're seeing user complaints about steering flaws, system glitches, and the full-fat version is only available on their priciest models. The source analysis even goes so far as to call their code a hodgepodge.
And that brings us to a really telling plot twist. Not long ago, Nvidia announced a brand new partnership with BYD. Now, this caught a lot of people by surprise, mostly because the assumption was that BYD was building all of its own tech from the ground up. And this raises the absolute million-dollar question from the analysis. If your tech is so good, if you're a true world leader, why would you suddenly be looking for dance partners? It's a huge signal that maybe, just maybe, BYD is way further behind on self-driving than the hype would have you believe.
Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about Waymo. As the original pioneer, the one that spun out of Google, they're often held up as the gold standard, the technical benchmark. But as this analysis shows, even the pioneer is struggling with some really deep, fundamental problems.
I mean, just listen to this quote from Waymo's own co-CEO. It's incredibly revealing. He straight up admits their system doesn't generalize. They can't just take the software that works in, say, San Francisco and just plop it down in London and expect it to work. Nope. Every single new city needs a ton of special work and validation. That is a massive barrier to scaling globally. The source uses this fantastic analogy to explain a core issue. They call it the miniature clock problem. Think about it. If you want a tiny, precise wristwatch, you can't just take the giant gears from a grandfather clock and shrink them down. It won't work. You need a totally new design. The argument here is that trying to slowly evolve a basic driver assist system into a truly autonomous one is just the wrong approach. It's like trying to shrink those giant gears.
And the hardware problems are just as big a deal. Waymo is still basically retrofitting regular consumer cars like Jaguars. Their new custom-built vehicle, the Zeekr, well, it's made in China, which means it would get hit with a crippling 100% import tariff in the US. They just don't have the scale to get a major car company to build a custom car for them, and those LiDAR sensor arrays are still pretty bulky and complex. You know, it's not just about the car itself. The day-to-day operations are a huge, unsolved problem. Let's just walk through a day at a Waymo depot. The car drives in by itself. Cool. But then, a human gets flagged to come over and manually clean it. Then, another human has to come over and physically plug in the charger. Only then can the car go out for another trip. That whole vision of a fully automated, hands-off fleet? Yeah, we're not there yet. So while Waymo's co-CEO calls this a fully automatically orchestrated dance, the reality for the two most critical steps, cleaning and charging, is much simpler. When it comes to the really important stuff, the analysis is blunt. It's all manual. This brings us to Nvidia, the company that's often seen as the great equalizer, the one that's supposedly arming this whole army of competitors to take on the big players. But is that what's really going on? The gold rush analogy that the source uses here is absolutely perfect for understanding Nvidia's role. They make amazing picks and shovels, you know, the super powerful chips and software platforms. But here's the thing. They aren't selling a map to the gold mine. The car companies still have to do the incredibly difficult work of actually finding the gold, which means solving autonomy all by themselves. 19. That's the number of automakers that Nvidia announced they were partnering with. And that single number created a very powerful perception. All of a sudden, the story was that Nvidia was just handing out a ready-made, turnkey solution.
The assumption became that any one of those 19 companies could just plug in Nvidia's tech and, poof, instantly have a competitive self-driving car. But here's the twist, and it's a huge one, coming directly from Nvidia's VP of Automotive. He revealed that their single biggest customer in the entire auto industry is Tesla. Not for the chip in their cars, but for the thousands and thousands of GPUs Tesla buys to train its AI in its giant data centers.
And that really gets to the heart of it. Nvidia doesn't sell a complete solution. It's way more like a puzzle. Car companies can buy different pieces, a chip from here, a piece of software from there, but they still have to figure out how to put it all together into something that actually works. And that is a monumental, monumental task.
Okay, so after digging into BYD, Waymo, and Nvidia, what does the reality of this race actually look like? What are the real barriers that pretty much everyone is slamming into?
Well, this analysis suggests there are basically two main paths people are trying to take. The first is to slowly evolve your advanced driver assist systems, ADAS, like your fancy cruise control, into full autonomy. That's the miniature clock problem we talked about. The second path is the Robotaxi first approach, like Waymo. It's designed for autonomy from day one, but as we've seen, it faces these gigantic real-world problems with scaling and just basic operations.
So when you boil it all down, 3 core challenges really emerge from all this, and they go way beyond just writing clever code. First, there's the massive challenge of scaling. How do you go from a few geofenced cities to the entire world? Then there's hardware. How do you build a custom, affordable car by the millions? And finally, operations. How do you automate the entire village of people it takes to keep a fleet cleaned, charged, and running?
And that leaves us with one last, really crucial question to chew on. For years, everyone's been focused on solving the core AI problem. But what if that's only half the battle? This analysis forces us to ask, is the real challenge the true bottleneck, solving the massive, messy, real-world problems of manufacturing, global scaling, and fleet operations? Because based on this, the answer to that question could change everything we think we know about this race.